So the number one question I get asked when people find out that I have 80 guitars is, how do I take care of them? How much time does it take? Am I spending all my life changing strings and polishing stuff, etc., etc.? Well, the reality is, maintaining 80 guitars is easier than you think. And today I'm going to tell you about how I do it. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. My name is Utkarsh Mohan. I'm coming to you from Singapore. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please do like, subscribe, and share. It really helps. My number one objective here is to grow an audience, and all of these actions really help, particularly sharing. Now, I have 80 guitars. It's quite an ordeal to even remember all of them, let alone maintain them, you would think. But it is surprisingly easy. So what I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about my philosophy in maintaining them. And it is a certain philosophy. There are variations. And then I'll talk about the 2 or 3 tangible things that I do to maintain them, and finally I'll reveal how much it costs me and how much time it takes for me. So what am I fundamentally solving for? I'm solving for something very simple. I'm solving for every guitar to be in playing condition whenever I want to pick it up. That's it. I am not solving for everything to look like it could be put in a showroom in concourse condition, polished to the moon, etc., etc. I'm not looking for that. I'm primarily a guitarist, and all I want is a guitar that plays correctly with the correct setup, with everything. So that's what I'm solving for. So with that in mind, there are a few things that are very important to ensure this, and the most important one is climate control. So let's talk about climate control and why it's so important. So why is climate control the most critical thing? Well, it is what maintains your guitar's condition in the way it needs to be. And secondly, if you think about the playability aspect of it, which is setup, the more constant your climate, the less the chances of the guitar's wood moving, the neck moving, the action becoming high or low, needing a truss rod adjustment. So everything starts with climate control. What do I do? What I do is my guitars are all stored in one room. You can see it behind me. And on top of the room being generally air conditioned and maintained at a certain temperature, there are 2 additional precautions that I take. Precaution number 1 is this. I guess I'll have just to show you. I just rolled it. It's a dehumidifier. It maintains the room at a constant 60% humidity. It's not very expensive. It's something I bought. It cost me a couple of $100. It runs for a reasonable amount of time. It actually doesn't need to run because the air conditioning already has a semi-dehumidifying effect. So that's one. The second thing that I do is Dario comes up with these particular inner case climate control sachets or pouches, and I put them in all the hard cases that I have. And I say all the hard cases of guitars that are worth, say, over $3,000 or $4,000. Actually, most hard cases have guitars that are worth over $3,000 or $4,000. So I put that in everything. And that's all I do, nothing else. That's it. The room is generally air conditioned. One of the reasons it's air conditioned is I do live in tropical Singapore, and I do own 2 rough collie dogs. And these dogs are, of course, they're from the highlands of Scotland, so they're not really meant for tropical Singapore. You could say, why do I have these dogs? Why don't I get a different breed? Well, all of us are inner children at some point in time. It was my dream as a child to have a rough collie. You could blame Lassie, you could blame the dog book that I got when I was 7 years old. So when it came time for us to get dogs, I knew it could only be one breed. It was going to be the rough collie. So these guys also need a little bit of cooler temperature. So this room is a perfect way for me to both maintain my guitars and maintain a cool environment for my dogs. So that's why this room is generally kept cooled all day. My entire house is not air conditioned. I mean, it has air conditioning, but you don't keep it air conditioned all day. The bills would be too crazy for that. But this room is. So that's it. And that fundamental step of climate control is the biggest contributor to everything. I'm going to get to the next step, which is low impact contact. Now, another thing that leads to the guitars having wear and tear and needing adjustment is the human factor. Now, the good thing for me is this room is climate controlled, and in general, a lot of bands, they have people who say, I have toxic sweat and I really run through my guitars. Luckily for me, I am quite the opposite. in terms of sweat, for me, it's actually very, very, I would say I would be on the spectrum, on the very low side of the spectrum compared to most people that I know. And in general, the room is air conditioned, so sweat is almost never a problem. The second thing is, at least when I'm sitting in the room and playing, I am not particularly hard on my guitars. Of course, when I'm in a live gig, all things are thrown out of the window. But in the room, I'm basically guy. There's no sweat. I'm playing the guitar relatively moderately, though of course I do shake the neck for a vibrato or something. So I don't really end up creating a significant impact on the guitar. So the consequence of this is, which we'll get to the third thing, which is the ongoing maintenance, is that when it comes to strings and setup, I really don't have to do all that much. A lot of my guitars still have their original strings on them, which is shocking. I have a PRS Graveyard 2. The guitar was built in 2018. I bought it in 2021 or 2020. Sorry, 2020. Or rather, sorry, 2019. I'm just trying to mix up the years here. It's been 5 years. The strings are the same on them. There is a PRS Modern Eagle 1 that I bought in 2018, 17. Still have the original strings on it. I'm not trying to not change strings for the sake of it. But at the same time, if the strings are fine, and remember I have like 80 guitars to play with, it's not my main guitar that I want to constantly keep a fresh set of strings for gigging or something, I don't change the strings. Now, the other thing that I can't stand though is rust. So the moment I see rust, I absolutely have to change. But one of the things I've noticed is I have not had any rusting strings in any of my guitars. It's been maybe 5 or 6 years now. I haven't seen a rusty string. I really think it's down to the climate control. The only string changes that I've really been doing is when I've been experimenting with, I want to try this heavier string gauge. I want to down tune a guitar. I want to experiment with a different other tuning, alternative tunings. That's when I've been doing all of these changes. In general, the only guitar that has been needing consistent string changes has been my live guitar, my PRS Custom 24 piezo, because that's the one that I play with my band. So that one does need a string change every now and then. But all the other guitars, it's really very infrequent. Now again, we could go back to the philosophy. A lot of you will say, no, strings after a while, they start sounding dull. You have to change them. Old strings are not as bright as new strings. This is where it goes back to my philosophy. A guitar should be playable. In terms of whether it sounds duller or brighter, honestly, there may be a slight difference, but it's not something that is perceptible enough to me to make a difference that I want to change it. So I am a very, very practical person. I just go with, if a guitar needs string changing because it's not able to play or the string has broken, then I will change it. Otherwise, if it's in pristine condition, I will just let it be. I will not artificially change it because the string needs to be changed every 6 to 12 months. I'm trying to count how many string changes I've done in the last 12 months just to keep this, give you some real insight. I think I have done 10 string changes, and 4 of them have been to change the tuning. So that should tell you I have 80 guitars. I've only done 10 string changes in the last 1 year. The next one, visual inspection and playing. So what is critical is that when you have so many guitars, that you play all of them. And when you play all of them, a lot of things get taken care of. Ports that may get stuck don't get stuck. Switches that may get jammed don't get jammed, because everything is getting operated and played. Now, it happens naturally because I like playing my guitar, so naturally I end up playing most of them. But what I'm very cognizant of is that if there's a guitar that I have not played for more than a month, I literally take it out of its case and I play it for a while. One, it's a good change. And second, when I play it, I just do everything. I do flip the switches, turn the knobs, make sure everything is working fine, not jammed. Again, this is not something I consciously have to do because most of my guitars get played just like that, because I love guitars. That's one of the pleasures of having 80 guitars. But there are a lot of guitars that sometimes don't get played, especially some of the less expensive guitars. I've talked about this in my video, Are Expensive Guitars Worth It? Cheaper guitars are definitely good enough, but More expensive guitars are definitely nicer. So I do end up playing the more expensive guitars more often than the cheaper guitars that I have. Last one, is there any other maintenance or any other cost that I have? It's really only been experimenting. So, when it comes to PRS guitars or rather any expensive guitars, I don't trust myself with the work. If I want to try out a new set of pickups or if I want to do something very particular, and that's where I often take the guitars to my luthier, G-Works Goose, one of the best luthiers in Singapore. And he's helped me out in a few places. So I wanted to, I had a DGT. I turned it to the DGT of Doom with very high output pickups. But recently I was getting gas for normal DGT, so I swapped back the DGT pickups in it. So he does all of that for me. And there is one guitar that needs maintenance. It's a Martin. It's a Martin, what's it called? OM28. That guitar is giving me a little bit of trouble. So that guitar is sitting with Goose right now. We'll have a future video on the channel. But other than pickup swaps and temperamental acoustic guitar, nothing much really. So the last part that you're waiting for, how much time did it take and how much has it cost me? So I have the math in front of me. It has cost me 1,100 Singapore dollars in the last year to maintain my guitars. And I'm going to give you the breakdown. 200 of it is basically string changes. So it's basically 10 sets of strings. I generally use elixirs, so they're more expensive usually. Second one, the $700 is the biggest chunk of it. That is what it is taking to take care of the Martin. So the Martin that I had, it has a few issues. The binding, or rather the herringbone surround is kind of coming off, and the top, what happens in the tropics with acoustic guitars. And the Martin I've had for a very long time, well before I had 80 guitars. I've had it since 2015. So what happened is that the top tends to rise, so they need to do some work. So there's a lot of work going on. So that's $700 for the Martin. And the final one is $200. $200 is essentially, I forgot to mention this. What I do is, every time I get a new guitar, I get strap locks. And what I get is I get my luthier Goose's help to install them. Not that I can't install them myself, but hey, if it's a $10,000-$15,000 guitar, I don't want anybody except an expert touching that guitar from a technical standpoint. So that's what I do. Even though I can install strap locks myself, these are the Dunlop strap locks, I get Goose to do it for me because this guy, I would trust him with anything, any guitar, right? He's the best, and I don't trust myself with a screwdriver. I can do it, but I'll just let him do it. So $200 is basically the cost of the strap locks and the cost. I mean, Goose just does it. He doesn't ask for anything, but I'm like, if you're doing something for me, I think everybody deserves to be paid for the labor. So that's it. That's it. $1,100 or maybe 800 US dollars. That's all it has cost me to maintain my 80 guitars over the last year.